All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the conference. For those of you that attended the banquet last night, thank you very much. It was a wonderful event. And we raised some good money for the Imagination Library, thanks to some great generosity. I'd just like to open by saying, for those of you who haven't, and I know it's day 3, but some people are here for the first time, downloaded the Geoscience app, please take the time to do that. It has messages for other delegates. You can view the agenda, speaker bios. They are very small, so wear your glasses. It gives you the opportunity to participate in a scavenger hunt, and there's some great prizes for that. And an opportunity to submit feedback, and we really welcome the feedback. It's our first year taking this event in-house, and so we're looking forward to any feedback you may have. The poster sessions today are at the Longhouse, Core Shack today as well. You can look at during the lunch breaks. We encourage you to go look at those. Those are in the next room. And for today's agenda, we are starting with economic reconciliation. This portion of the agenda is sponsored by JDS Energy and Mining. Thank them for their sponsorship. And it gives me, sorry, I have the wrong one up front. Sorry, Kody. From 8:30 to 9, our first speaker today will be Kody Penner, VP Nations Royalty, publicly traded company. The New Age of Economic Reconciliation is the name of his talk. Kody's an Indigenous mining professional with a diverse background in the capital markets, mining, Indigenous business, and Indigenous governance. He brings a holistic approach to resource development by aligning values formed from all parties forward's common goals. He's passionate about developing sustainable resources, projects, and growing Indigenous wealth. It is my pleasure to welcome to the podium, Kody Penner.
I get that a lot. I get that a lot. Perfect. Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Kody Penner. I'm a Tahltan member. For those of you that don't know where Tahltan territory is, Northwest BC, big swath of land. A little tip goes into the Yukon. I have family up here. I've spent lots of time in Whitehorse, and I absolutely love this place. I love old history, like the Klondike and like Prospect, or just going out there and getting it done, coming from all over the world. And I love that culture stays in the city every time I'm here. Love going to the museum, seeing my family, making new friends, seeing old friends, and so happy to be here at this conference. And thank you so much for the invite, guys. Appreciate it. So, in addition to being a Tahltan member, I'm Vice President of Corporate Development for Nations Royalty. We are Canada's first and largest majority Indigenous-owned public company, which is pretty darn cool if you ask me. So, we're the first, we're the largest, but we certainly hope we're not the last. We want other Indigenous people to follow in our footsteps and leverage the public capital markets to create wealth and access capital that's been historically out of reach for Indigenous people. But much delayed. There we go. So a little bit about myself first. For almost as long as I can remember, the mining has played an important part in my life. Mining is very big in the Penner family. I come from a long line of workers that would get out at the crack of dawn, travel to camp, travel into a hole in the ground to bust rock to get the minerals that we need to sustain the life that we have today. These are the workers that understand the value of a hard day's work and what's shaped me into who I am today. Dad was a miner working underground, managing several mines across BC and internationally, and my brother followed in his footsteps and ended up becoming a mine engineer. They actually both live and work in Fiji right now, which I thought is pretty cool. Dad's the mine manager, brother's a mining engineer. And just to show you how much we love mining, every Halloween my brother would dress as a miner. A little hard hat and belt and a wrench, a little slickers on. Very original, I know. So And for the first couple years of my life, I was born in Nelson, BC. We lived at the mine house just down from the mine portal. It was probably a 3-minute walk to the portal of the Kenville gold mine. It's the oldest recorded gold mine in British Columbia history. And throughout this process, I grew up with the necessary understanding that if the mine didn't run, there wouldn't be any food on the table for the family. Dad was a miner, and that's where we made our income from. And as I got older, I worked in a variety of industries. I worked in oil and gas, forestry, all sorts of different places. But I eventually followed in the family footsteps and worked underground at Bruce Jack, running jackleg, heavy equipment, running services. And then I slowly worked my way into the corporate side of the business where I can come and chat with you guys today. But importantly, as an Indigenous person in the mining industry, I've witnessed the stereotypes and hardships faced by Indigenous people. I heard the complaints in mining circles saying that Indigenous people were an impediment to development. But I also observed the potential and the abundance of resources on our land and knew there was a way to work with the mining industry and leverage our resources to create wealth for our future generations and Indigenous people in Canada as a whole. And as I advanced in my career, I got an insider view of both sides of the conversation. I joined the Tahltan Central Government as the Employment Director and later became Vice Chair of the Tahltan Nation Development Corporation, getting a first-hand understanding of my nation's vision for economic development and nation building. I had the privilege of sitting in elder council meetings and board meetings, which deepened my understanding of both traditional knowledge and corporate decision-making. I later went on to work with Skeena Resources in investor relations and Agentis Capital in equity research, and then tech resources, so working in capital markets and financial strategy. And I've taken part in conversations about Indigenous inclusion from all sides, seeing the different pieces of the discussion and witnessing what can be accomplished when we align our values towards a common goal. Very delayed, okay. When a project enters Indigenous land, it instantly puts culture, people, and environment up for risk, and more things. For Indigenous communities, values go beyond monetary exchange. It's deep family ties and connection to the land. Sure. Look at that, speed. Deep connection to the land. This is often overlooked in the rush for development. As I watched various projects unfold, it was always clear to me that there must be a better way. By exploring opportunities in the public capital markets, like Nation's Royalty's done, we can create responsible economic growth that provides financial security for future generations. We're breaking new ground, and we're launching a new age of economic reconciliation. Founded by the self-governing Nisga'a Nation, a nation that had the will, the vision, and the dedication to create their own path to wealth, which I'll get into a little further later on. Our company allows Indigenous groups to bring the value of their existing royalties forward and generate revenue today. From the Dutch East India Company, the New York Stock Exchange, and Apple Computers, history's proven the power of the public capital markets to generate outsized returns and a level of wealth that has never been achieved before. The ability to leverage attractive earnings for financial gains today. Through our work at Nation's Royalty, I'd like to demonstrate how Indigenous peoples are in an ideal position to take advantage of changing legal landscapes, leverage their resources, and work together to generate wealth for our families and for future generations. But it starts by acknowledging how far we've come. A century ago, it seemed unlikely that Indigenous communities would have a significant role in resource development. Historically, wealth existed prior to contact, but it was diminished through legislative assaults and colonial impacts. Today, we're focused on revitalizing our nations and paving the way for more meaningful participation in resource development. Wealth that won't just enrich the lucky few, but will work to heal nations, create growth, and advance economic reconciliation. But it won't happen overnight. It's going to take a lot of work. I recently had the pleasure of talking with Bill Namagoose. He's a former chief of the James Bay Cree and the Grand Chief of the Cree Nation, who told me a story of 400 miles of roads crossing Cree land without an offer of partnership. No compensation, no Indigenous buy-in, no respect given to the land or the people. And this is just the experience of one nation. While we face challenges, the mining development process has changed and we're better off for it. This is because of the Indigenous leaders who have fought tooth and nail for titles to their traditional lands and have won some crucial victories along the way, creating a new legal landscape. As a result of their contributions, substantive benefit and royalty agreements have been negotiated with resource companies that respect Indigenous autonomy through business partnerships. Our relationships with the federal government and with outside actors are continuing to change, giving us more opportunity to be true partners in developing the resources in our own backyards. This sovereignty and control have proven to be essential for creating long-term wealth in Canada and internationally. Many nations have worked for generations to opt out of the Indian Act or to create new governance structures that have unlocked a world of new opportunities. For example, the founding nation of the nation's royalty, the Nisga'a, has generated revenue from their nation through 4 mining projects and 5 royalties. By opting out of the Indian Act, as the nation did in the year 2000, the Nisga'a have been free to pursue prosperity within a decision-making structure that they have created on their own terms. And they're just one example of the nations who are redefining the legal framework that we operate in. But now it's time to take the next step. To go beyond collecting royalty checks year after year at the mercy of the mining development timelines and create excess gains that can be used to fuel growth in our communities. And that's what we're focused on at Nations Royalty. At a basic level, our mission is to help maximize and bring forward the value of mining royalty agreements for Indigenous communities. But how do we do that? The work starts by helping communities negotiate the most valuable royalty agreements so they're getting the top line royalties that benefit them without the deduction of operating costs and the downside effects of erosion from inflation. Because as most here will know, there's a million ways that miners can skin the cat to pay their royalty owners the least amount of money as possible. And we've been seeing that in some traditional agreements that Indigenous folks have. Alongside this work that we actually do, we help groups negotiate better deals. We want more Indigenous communities to partner with us, working as one family to pool our royalties and leverage our unified strength to become the leading mining royalty company, and the first one majority owned by Indigenous people. But mining royalty companies, this isn't a new concept. This has been done for centuries. Pooling royalties to attract investments is an idea that's been used by other companies such as Wheaton Precious Metals, Franco-Nevada. They're about $30 to $40 billion Canadian companies, very, very successful. They produce long-term stable dividends, and they trade at valuations much, much higher than the rest of the mining industry. But there's a problem. It's very, very competitive in this space. To grow to that size, there's only a select few that have done so. You either have to niche out into particular commodities, go earlier stage, very difficult to grow. But in Nations Royalty, we're tapping into the last untapped pool of existing royalties anywhere in the world. Those are Indigenous owned and controlled mining royalties. As an Indigenous owned and managed public company, we're keeping Indigenous wealth in Indigenous hands. A huge part of the inspiration for Nations Royalty was to create an Indigenous controlled vehicle and use the tools that others have been successfully using for years. Through Nations Royalty business model, royalties are still owned by Indigenous communities, but the maximum value is unlocked through a portfolio of diversified royalties, lowering the risk associated with holding a single asset. You guys know the old adage, don't hold all your eggs in one basket, right? So if you own a single mining royalty and the mine has to shut down, the taps are turned off. Nothing flows and the royalty payments stop. Or sometimes it takes years for a mine to actually get into production. You don't see those cash flows for 5, 10 years, however long the development stage is. But by coming together, we not only lower the risk profile, but we also tap the value of those future payments today by using the previously inaccessible public capital markets to generate greater wealth and accelerate economic development initiatives for our communities. And in short, the sum becomes greater than its parts. Nations Royalty was created with the recognition of the sheer amount of wealth Indigenous people already own in the form of royalty payments. Indigenous communities can now bring the value forward, and by doing so, we can own the businesses and the resources in our territories, rather than merely taking a portion. Imagine if we pooled all Indigenous royalties in one pot. We would diversify the risk across multiple assets rather than relying on any single one. Outside investors love this model because it offers the same return with lower risk, and they're willing to pay up for it. As we attract more investment, our share price increases, benefiting our communities and any shareholders that join the company and decided to partner with us. This approach is much more than economics, though. When Indigenous people own rather than take, we see increased pride, happiness, and autonomy. Selkirk First Nation is a prime example of this. Their recent purchase of the Minto mine shows how Indigenous ownership can drive real economic success. In fact, if we're going to talk about moving into this new age of economic sovereignty and reconciliation, we need to do just that, using the strength, resilience, and creativity that are inherent to our culture and our way of life. I often think about how the strength created abundance in our communities prior to European colonial settlements, when Indigenous markets supported trade networks. While it wasn't measured in dollars and cents, it was real wealth baked into our ways of living. Indigenous people were wealthy. We had family, food, shelter, governance models, laws. We had abundance, we had wealth, and it wasn't necessarily in fiat money. I didn't have US dollars back in the day, but we were wealthy people. But since that time, we've gone through the valley. We've been forced to start miles behind our Canadian peers and our competitors. But today, as many of us has broken down the barriers to our success, we're on the brink of a major transformation. We're entering a new era of Indigenous wealth via the public capital markets. There we go. And I want to be clear about one thing. This is more than just an idea. This is what's happening right now. It's real. The team at Nations Royalty is a first mover in the Indigenous royalty space, and we're seeing significant interest and engagement. So in 2023 alone, just to talk about the size of the prize and the vision, there was $350 million worth of Indigenous payments that went to, or payments in the metal and mining sector that went to Indigenous groups. When you include oil and gas, that's over $700 million. With renewables, it's over $1 billion. So there was $1 billion of payments that went to Indigenous people in the form of royalties just in Canada. Now picture all of the future cash flows of that. We have $1 billion 2023. Next year it might be $1.1 billion. All those future payments. The present value of all those payments is in the billions and billions of dollars. Imagine bringing all that forward, putting it into a public vehicle, allow outsiders to invest in it, allow that price to rise, the share price to rise, so we actually multiply the value of those. And the largest mining royalty companies trade at 2 times, it's called PNAV, essentially price over net asset value, which is a ridiculous valuation. So you could upwards of double all that future wealth. And then imagine leveraging that and borrowing on it. If we did that overnight, Indigenous people of Canada internationally could have billions of dollars of capital to deploy in any way they want, right? Private equity, different infrastructure spends, whatever you want, social programs, housing, whatever it may be. We could create that wealth. We have the power to do it. We've created the vehicle to do that. Nations Royalty is a tool to accomplish any kind of economic reconciliation that different groups want to do in their form. We're carving this out in the mining royalty space. Once again, this model's been proven, but this is only the beginning. It's my belief that this potential for wealth creation can be replicated across all sorts of different industries and businesses. Using the public capital markets to unlock gains for Indigenous people is the natural next step in economic reconciliation and reclaiming ownership of our future. It's an exciting time. It's a hopeful time. At Nations Royalty, we're dedicating to help build capacity and representation of Indigenous people in the public capital markets. We see a future where Indigenous people are leaders and drivers of economic growth from coast to coast to coast. And it starts with the people in this room. Leaders who are ready to envision the new age of economic reconciliation, who see that Indigenous people have all the tools they need to enact seismic change, and we just need to go out and make it happen. So thank you all for coming to chat about Nations Royalty and talk about our vision for wealth creation and utilizing the public markets with Indigenous wealth. I'd love to chat with each and every one of you if you have any questions and listen to your insights and thoughts. So Thank you so much. Okay, we're opening up to questions. Anybody? Throw me a softball. Don't do anything too hard. Yeah, we trade on the TSXV. We're on the Frankfurt Exchange and the OTC in the States. It's at about 8. It's a good day to ask that question. We just went up like 12%. We just went up 12%. We're trading about 80 cents, so we're about 100 million market cap. And Nishka owns 77%. Our founding partner, Nishka Nation, they own 77% of that. About 144 mil. Yeah, yeah. So basically, how it happened, I'll tell you the creation story. It was Rob McLeod. I'm sure lots of people in the room know Rob McLeod. He grew up in Stewart, so he has long-time connections to the Nishka Nation. So basically, he was having dinner with Nishka leadership, and he's like, "Oh, you guys must be making some good royalty revenue off of your Bruce Jack royalty." And they're like, "Yeah, we make a few mil a year," something like that. And he's like, "Oh, well," it kind of perked his interest. He ran a financial model on their 5 royalties, and it had a $214 million net asset value, US, right? So that's a significant amount. So they were like, "Holy cow, like that could be the start of a royalty company." They bring that to Frank Justra, who's a mining entrepreneur. He's successful. He helped create Gold Corp, which was the largest mining company in the world, and he was the founder of Wheaton Precious Metals, which is the largest royalty company in the world. They brought it to Frank, and he's like, "Holy cow! Like this will be as impactful as streaming was back in 2004." And that was kind of the creation story of it. So Nishka vended in all 5 of their royalties, all the future payments from them, and they got 77% of the company. So they have about 111 million shares of the company. Yeah. Anyone else? Not yet. A lot of our NAV is in development stage, right? So KSM is the majority of our net asset value right now. I'm sure everybody has their own thoughts on KSM owned by Seabridge.
So how does that affect the cash flow for Nishka then? If all that's now in Mason's royalty, how do they get any cash flow from the royalty?
They wouldn't be getting any right now. They would just be getting share appreciation, right? And they're actually in a 3-year escrow, so they can't, and it's vested a little bit out throughout, so they can't sell any of their shares currently. They're basically locked up for 3 years. They were willing to do that because they didn't need the royalty income at the moment. About 90% of our portfolio is in development stage, so they aren't actually seeing those cash flows at all, right? So the fact that we actually brought them forward, they now own, on the given day, $80 million worth of equity, and that's on their balance sheet. So now their trust fund or their pool of money is actually much larger, right, today, versus if they were just waiting for those royalty payments to pay out in the future, they would have to wait, 5-10 years whenever they pay out more, potentially, right? So at least it's more tangible. They're getting share appreciation today, right? And as we grow, $100%. At the end of the day, our first goal is shareholder return. Nishka owns 77%. My goal is to make them wealthier, right? And if that means branching out into any other royalties that make sense, 100%. We have a little bit of a liquidity crunch, meaning we don't have a ton of shares that are actually open to the public. So in the future, we might actually look at merging, actually buying another royalty company, which I think would be pretty cool. You have an indigenous royalty company and you go buy a non-indigenous company, right? Like that would send shockwaves to the industry. It'd be pretty cool. I'm looking internationally, but the relationship between the Crown and Canadian Indigenous people is much different and further ahead, if you'd like to call it that, in Canada, right? So the royalty payments and those structures are actually much more advanced in Canada than anywhere else on the globe. So I'm chatting with people in Australia, a few in the States, all over the place. But as mentioned, $350 million paid out to Indigenous groups just in Canada last year. Like that's a ton of work in itself, right? If we could capture even half of that, we would be a top royalty company. And then we'd be able to pay, as you mentioned, we'd be able to pay and just be a traditional royalty financier, right? And get that nice return on your capital that other royalty companies have been getting for like 30 years. Anyone else? Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. I got 2 cups going here.
That's okay. Leave one if you want to.
You want some more warm coffee?
Not really. All right, thank you, Kody. It's a real honor to see where Kody has come. We started working together a decade ago, and his progress is not surprising because his passion and his heart equal his physical size. And I'm really excited to watch where Kody's going to go with these things. I consider him a good friend. We had some great fun and hard conversations, and yet at the end of it, the successes are coming and it is time, and it's really exciting to watch you be on the cutting edge. Thanks, Kody.